Chapter 2 Beginnings. Do you remember your first dance lesson? When I consider the introductory lesson of a new student, I imagine it being the most significant of any other. After all, it has the potential to open the door to a new life. Whenever we begin something new, we start to change. Change is dependent upon the continuance of activity to bring about growth, improvement, and so forth. This is the process of development. It always involves repetition. We learn best by doing, and by doing we grow. Learning to dance is really the same as learning to do anything else. You may have greater ability to learn one thing over another, but the requirements for learning remain the same: effort, consistency, patience, and accountability. The English art critic and social thinker John Ruskin once wrote, "The highest reward for a person's toil is not what they get for it, but what they become by it." Unquote. This thought encourages us to consider our perspective towards lessons we've learned throughout our lives. What have we gained from them? What have we become because of them? Also, where we receive instruction is significant, reminding us to be cautious at times of where our influences are coming from. But as we move along through life, growing to achieve our goals, we should also remember to look back far enough to remember our beginnings and take note of where we've come from. The worth of anything is only measured in the process of its development, and we may never know the true value of an experience until we appreciate where and who we would be without it. Beginnings are sometimes stumbled onto, but they always add definition to who we are. One beginning will exist in the start of a new job or a business which carries on to great opportunities. Many people go back to school to start a new beginning, with hope for a better future and better life for themselves and for their family. These experiences, accumulated over time, define us, acting like a bridge that links us to our past. They serve as a testament to where we've come from. At the same time, this bridge of experience carries us along a course of life that makes us who we are. This is why it is said, "A person is not who they are today, but are the sum of your experience with them." A good friend of mine volunteered to share her experience with dance that changed her life significantly over a short period of time. She writes, quote, "I came from Brazil to the United States in 2001. I've been ballroom dancing since October of 2005. I was interested in getting some sort of experience and decided to try dancing in a small studio located in Edmonds, Washington. My first time in the studio I felt strange, a little self-conscious about my appearance due to all the mirrors in the studio. The presence of other students kind of intimidated me since I was new and wasn't sure about how I looked to others. After the first and second lessons, I started to feel more excited and interested to see what I looked like dancing. For 1 year I took classes and got interested in learning further. During my first year as a student, I participated in a ballroom competition where I had a wonderful time and enjoyed very much watching the participants and the shows. When I first started ballroom, I was only interested in salsa, but after the competition, smooth dance started to catch my eye. For about 8 months after that, I was in an intense program to become a professional instructor. I acquired a lot of experience and knowledge. Dancing always makes me smile and brings me happiness." End quote. Andrea Akiyama, Seattle, Washington, student and teacher of ballroom dance. As a dance teacher myself, I have had the privilege of sharing the beginnings of many individuals as they have taken their first steps in developing the capabilities of their mind relative to their feet. Experience has shown that as each individual comes with unique circumstances and different backgrounds, each also comes with his or her own level of expectation. This makes teaching an interesting challenge. A teacher recognizes that the first few lessons are critical in defining the individual's learning style and identifying natural ability so that learning may become easier. But the greater challenge has always been in making individual wants submit to individual needs, since the two are rarely ever the same. Quote, "Human beings who are almost unique in having the ability to learn from the experience of others are also remarkable for their apparent disinclination to do so." End quote. Douglas Adams, author and dramatist. Life experience tells us that having a coach to assist with the discontinuity of wants and needs is the best way to accommodate progress and growth. A coach is practiced in observing what the individual needs. Having the benefit of an outside view, a coach can watch the process of one's development with careful observation. A coach will fine-tune areas of progress and make great adjustments where little progress is being made. In this way, our coaches act as the tuners of fine instruments. With the knowledge of how the music should sound, they pluck and blow and tweak and pound out the notes with carefully practiced hands until each note falls in harmony with the others. This notion is perhaps best reflected by George Balanchine, one of the 20th century's foremost choreographers, who stated, quote, "Dancers are instruments, like a piano the choreographer plays." End quote. In this statement, he shows us how, in this case, the choreographer is a coach, helping each dancer perform as he or she was meant to. In another way, coaches can be seen as guides who present us with different paths. A guide knows the path very well, including all its bumps and twists. Dance coaches are likewise usually very good at guiding people through their dance training. However, life has few, if any, real guides that can tell us about all its parts and problems. There are many people, however, who are said to be life coaches, but to have a coach in this sense means to have someone who can assist in a particular area of decision-making related to a person's life and ambitions. There are really few, if any, who are life coaches in the truest sense of the expression. This is because there isn't any one person who is particularly exceptional at every aspect of living. Generally, we excel in only a few areas. Most of us, if we are very honest with ourselves, would agree that there are really only one or two things that we are particularly good at. We should also understand that everyone who achieves something has done so by the help and often guidance of others. At times, individuals can have moments of inspiration that lead to new innovation and achievement. Even so, most achievement is accomplished where others leave off, building off past achievements. Each generation piggybacks off generations past, laying new foundation for the generations to come. This progress requires continual learning, or we could not advance. Judith Gray, an author and dance instructor, stated, quote, "People learn most effectively by doing." End quote. That means active participation is required to learn best. To learn to dance, we watch and mimic and make mistakes, and watch some more and mimic again, until we have it right. It is worth mentioning that in this process we will fail many times in our aspirations to dance, before we learn to do it right, and that is part of the process too. "We learn wisdom from failure much more than from success," said author and reformist Samuel Smiles. "We often discover what will do by finding out what will not do." For a dancer, observation is necessary to understand the parts of a step. For this reason, some dances may be considered easier to learn, because they are broken down into simplified patterns. Those patterns are usually further broken down into a syllabus of steps and their variations, and graded with levels of difficulty. Once I met a young modern dancer who told me she could never learn ballroom. Quote, "There are so many steps and things to remember," she said. I told her, "Ballroom is easy, because steps are prescribed and memorized. Modern, on the other hand, that's something else. That takes talent and a great deal of creativity and imagination to do well." Then again, dances for couples, like ballroom and folk dancing, often use a syllabus to make learning easier. It's already hard enough learning to dance. Imagine the difficulty of learning with a person standing in front of you. Some dance forms have no syllabus at all. Contemporary, jazz, modern, and postmodern dance studies, for example, do not use a syllabus because it is understood that the dancer will develop this on their own. They essentially create their own syllabus and suit it to themselves individually. For this reason, I find that modern and contemporary dance are more relatable to day-to-day living. There is no syllabus for life, and we must rely on our own gifts, talents, and personal understanding of the world to navigate through it. We could ask, then, how do we best utilize these things to set a good path in life? And dance may have an answer. In contemporary dance classes, we explore the fundamentals of movement to discover what we are individually capable of. We watch other dancers as they leap and chasse and pas de bourrée, and receive guidance from them as to how these steps are executed. In these classes, we not only push the abilities of anatomical structure, but elaborate on predefined motion, working out the possibilities that are available to us. In doing so, an individual begins to develop a personal definition of movement that defines his or her own syllabus. Having discovered what movement can be made, it is now possible to develop it into variations and create a unique style. Fred Astaire once mentioned, quote, "The higher up you go, the more mistakes you are allowed. Right at the top, if you make enough of them, it's considered to be your style." End quote. In relation to life, discovering yourself is nothing more than a practice of exploring possibilities. Just as the dancer explores the possibilities of movement, we explore the possibilities of life. Discovering new things in this way is wonderful. It adds to our knowledge and understanding, harbors purpose, and clarifies our interests. We must have a clear idea about our interests. Simply observing, let's say, sewing, may cause you to think, "That could be fun. I think I might like that." But after learning to sew, you may find that you have no real desire to do anything of the sort. Instead, you realize that what you really enjoy is creating something with your own hands, just not with needle and thread. On the other hand, some will find that needlework is just what they've been missing. I once met a masseuse who always got enjoyment out of rubbing people's shoulders when they felt sore. She went on to massage therapy school and became a highly proficient masseuse. She is excited and happy about life when she is able to work with people in this way. Many others have also discovered a simple pleasure in doing work they find satisfies them more than anything else. Think of a maintenance man, a plumber, a school teacher, or nurse. I have known at least one individual in each of these fields who was so happy about their work that they often went home at the end of the day with a smile. They each took time to explore possibilities in their own lives and found out what mattered to them most. I also had the opportunity to look at different opportunities when deciding what to do with my life. I kept a number of different part-time jobs while I was in school finishing my undergraduate courses. I was under the distinct impression that I wanted to go to paramedic school before then and work out of the hospital and with the fire department. But as I got closer to that goal, I found that although I did want to work with people and help them, I wasn't too keen on the prospect of being around loud, obnoxious noises like a siren all day, or having people scream in my ear from pain. It occurred to me that this was not entirely compatible with the life of a paramedic. Fortunately, around this same time I had already spent a lot of time learning to dance, and found that I was well suited to it. I began teaching many of my friends how to dance so that I would have people to practice with, and I fell in love with the exercises. Teaching others and seeing them progress, gaining greater control and ability over their body and its extremities, put me in a good mood. I decided I could do this for the rest of my life. I went on to an instructor training program, and after finishing, decided to finish my education as well, teaching dance at every chance I got. But I would never have found the life I now get to live if I hadn't been active in many things, learning about myself and what I wanted to do. Dancers are no exception to the need to explore the self. They need to try many different styles and explore many different kinds of movement to clarify their interests in dance. Along the way, they begin a change that not only helps them to identify their interests, but begins to shape their personality so that they start to perform their dance with due emotion and quality of expression. Dancers may discover any number of styles they are capable of performing, but often they will feel more inclined to one or two areas of dance they are best at, and stick to them more than any other. I myself have found many dances within the ballroom world that seemed peculiar to me when first introduced, and to be honest, I didn't like to dance them much at all. But now they are some of my favorite dances of all, like the samba, rumba, and foxtrot. At the same time, though, some of the dances that I began to learn first and worked on the most no longer hold as much of an appeal as they once did. I still enjoy them, and I keep working on them, but I find that I prefer others instead. As I learned more about the dances and about myself, I started to change my mind about how I felt about certain dances. I clarified my likes and dislikes to better suit my individual identity and changed my attitude accordingly. To change is simply to modify our purpose or function to relate to a new one. A dancer will undergo many of these modifications in their development. Perhaps the first change to take place exists within the body itself, as muscle fibers strengthen and tone. Bone becomes denser, their circulatory system becomes stronger, and energy and stamina increase. Other changes take place in the mind and attitude of the individual. These happen as the dancer begins to grow beyond the individual steps and patterns of movement learned in classes, and begin to incorporate an emotional quality into his or her dancing. This, of course, is the most important change to affect a dancer's growth, because while a dancer may be able to effectively execute any number of intricate patterns, without intent, it is merely a practice of neuromuscular ability. Movement simply becomes a repetition of behaviors learned without expression. Movement must evoke something much more than this to be considered anything different than an exercise. Have you ever seen a dance performance where the dancers did not appear to really be dancing? Such a performance might look like a Shakespearean play, performed in our English vernacular, and monotone. There is no character or drama to it, leaving much to be desired. On the other hand, a performance by experienced people with intimate knowledge and familiarity with the emotions and characters they are performing is beautiful to watch and worth remembering. Likewise, you cannot dance a dance without knowing its personality. In effect, we cannot perform in life without our own individual character firmly in place. When dancers have a good understanding of themselves, who they are and want to be, as well as what they are performing, they will tell the story of the dance and its emotions with bright enthusiasm, energized by experience, compounded by imagination, and expressed with power by their individual spirits. So also will people perform in life with equal vigor as they come to identify with their own unique person within. Every dance has its own personality, making it unique to all other dances. The waltz, for example, is a regal dance, performed by a prince and princess, with widely stretched, bold frames as they glide across the floor, taking ownership of the space. Rumba is the woman's dance of passion and power, embodying the greatness of womanhood and sensuality. It is the dance of young lovers. The foxtrot is a sophisticated swing with easy-going strides, the dance of a breezy gentleman and his lady. Modern dances also have their characters, but they are different for every performance and have an infinite number of character possibilities. A dancer must eventually learn to exude character in performing a dance, since this is the only way to convey to his or her audience the nature and meaning of a dance. By doing this, the dancer taps into the natural reservoir of emotions inherent within each of us. While exploring it, he or she strengthens their own individual character, developing a steadiness of identity. All dancers strive to imitate numerous characters in order to perform with greater ability, thereby communicating to their audience effectively. In this process of coming to understand the characters of a dance, the dancer broadens their own understanding of personal character, thereby empowering them to live more potently, with more potential and greater confidence. We must also have this steadiness of personal identity and a correct understanding of our own nature to live honestly and confidently and effectively in society. That is, when we know ourselves, we act with more distinction and purpose behind what we do and say. Rather than being bystanders to events in life, we empower ourselves with the ability to take action for ourselves. We learn to lead rather than only follow. We also will have a better understanding and appreciation of others when we understand ourselves. Quote, "Dance is my refuge. It is a part of me that I express to help other people understand me. I started dancing at a time in my life that was really hard on my family. Dance helped me to stay sane and living. I have learned to connect emotion with dance. I can express it in any way, fun, sad, happy, excited. I feel like I have found where I belong, dance-wise, and I can use what I have learned for the rest of my life. Dancers should understand their feelings while dancing because that makes a better dancer, and the audience will have a better connection." Unquote. Bethany Casper, Rigby, Idaho, student and teacher of modern dance. As the dancer must undergo many changes, we, both men and women, must undergo a series of changes, changes of the mind and body, of character, of perception and spirit. These are necessary changes to suit a person to the practice of any area of interest. But they also encompass the details of individual growth, which grant a person the perception of potential and the concept of achievement. All changes come with conditions. The foremost condition is that you cannot change something from what it is into something else without it already having the properties of what it is to become inherent within. But what is human isn't foreign. This means that anything we can experience can be comprehended by others, whether they have had the same experiences or not. We can mimic experience through exploration within imagination, and begin to see how others may think and feel, and why they feel one way or another. Experience is everything when it comes to improvement in living, just as it is vital to dancing. It is by experience that we come to understand the properties of our own nature, and gain not only knowledge of ourselves, but an understanding of how to achieve our potential. We as dancers use experience in order to reach our potential, while we as people use experience to better understand ourselves and others. Where we lack in experience, we can make up for with imagination. The famous physicist Albert Einstein once said, quote, "Imagination is more important than knowledge, for while knowledge defines all we currently know and understand, imagination points to all we might yet discover and create." Unquote. Naturally, though, this system of imagination works best when we have actual experience for it to draw from, since real experience will always serve as a better illustration of reality than invented experience to base understanding on. This is why we always feel more comfortable doing things we have done before, and why we are so uncomfortable doing things we haven't. It goes without saying that experience is vital, and so we must seek out as much as we can while looking for our place in life. Studying and pondering play an essential part in supporting this idea, a sentiment echoed by John Dewey, a man known for his work as a psychologist and philosopher, who also spent a good deal of time working for educational reform and wrote, "Education, therefore, is a process of living, and not a preparation for future living." End quote. It is evident that we cannot progress very far on our own. Our limited knowledge or experience can only take us so far. Education is a must when it comes to personal development, which can take on the form of many habits. This word, habits, is used because when we talk about development, we are really only talking about practices which are designed to carry us from one state of living to another, also called change. And practices done often are called habits. Academia is one area where habits of personal development are fostered. But education isn't limited to academic institutions, so long as we have ambition to learn. Then the number one word to remember here is practice. And I bet you knew this was coming. We need practice. Anything we want to be good at has to be practiced. Quote, "A practice has to have a goal. Today we are going to practice foxtrot and waltz, and we're going to try to get through all of them. So we're going to practice it through without stopping to pick at or analyze. You need a form to follow. Warm up, dance through the dances, and then work on the parts that need correction. But I think warming up and dancing through the dances, even if you're dancing separate, just to reinforce it in your mind, is important. You need that little transition period. Some people transition from one thing to another more quickly. Others need this little warm-up time. I needed this warm-up time when I practiced. I couldn't say, okay, this dance is finished, let's go to the next one. I had to think, okay, what does this dance mean? What is it? There are a lot of things that can go right and wrong, but a very important thing is to create good habits in practice. If you want to be good, you have to practice. For it all to work in the best way, you have to enjoy practice. So if you don't practice, you better do something else, because you're not going to be really good without enjoying practice. If practice is a chore always, then you're going to end up unhappy. How much of dancing is performance? About 2% is performing. The rest is practice. That's the way I look at getting better." End quote. Ron Montez, interview July 21st, 2010, professional and former U.S. Latin champion. Practice causes development. It forces change, and as a principle, establishes attributes of character. Yes, I said it. Practice develops character. However, I do not mean for this to be confused with the cliché statement about the establishment of good moral fiber, or a disposition of endurance. Rather, what I say, I mean literally. What we practice is who we are, and who we are gives meaning to our character. Therefore, practice develops character. Have you ever heard the phrase, "I am who I am, and I cannot change that"? This is an opinion too highly thought of and widely used. It doesn't do anyone any good. We have had a lot of time to become who we are, true, but that does not mean that who we are is unchangeable. For instance, how did we become ourselves in the first place? One does what one is. One becomes what one does, said Robert von Musil, a writer from Austria during the early 20th century. We are who we are because we are practiced in being ourselves. Who we are is a habit, and should not be confused with a condition. Rather, we should think of ourselves as a collection of habits that dominate all of who we are and define every bit of our character. We are nothing less than what we do frequently, and the more we do it, the more polarized we become. One dance instructor of mine taught the concept of practice and habit regularly, saying, "It takes 500 times for movement to become muscle memory, and we're just getting started." Then he would have his students repeat an action again and again, After much practice and repetition, our muscles became used to the action, and our minds, out of habit, would automatically work to create the proper movement we wanted. There's a saying in the ballet school, quote, "If you miss one day of practice, you will know it. If you miss 2 days of practice, your classmates will know it. And if you should miss a week of practice, your audience will know it." So consistency is important in keeping ourselves at the best in what we do. Or as the famous lecturer and essayist Ralph Emerson suggested, quote, "That which we persist in doing becomes easier for us to do, not that the nature of the thing itself is changed, but that our power to do is increased." End quote. Dancers, like most people, have an easy time picking up bad habits. They may hyperextend at the lower back, causing their rear to stick out, or worse, they could cultivate a poor walking gait. Gait refers to how a person walks, and is characterized by what part of the foot strikes the ground first. They may allow their ankles to roll inward or outward, causing instability and potential for injury. We also can just as easily develop bad habits in our lives. For this reason, we must be mindful of the habits we are developing, and cautious of the influences around us. It is very easy to get caught up and carried away with ambitions and with people that hold an immediate appeal. But sometimes such people can lead us through a life full of day-to-day distractions. They may be entertaining, or suggest prospects of value, or offer us a sense of purpose and belonging. However, later on they may be found to be without good character, and the time spent with them has been wasteful. The problem with engaging in fruitless activities and spending time with people who are of lesser character than you yourself is that time is wasted on things that get you nowhere and teach nothing worthwhile. We often only realize this after much time has gone by, when we see for ourselves the full extent of the waste. Sometimes we find that we have made little or no progress with our lives. Each of us has habits and activities that fill our time. Some we do a little too often. Avoiding wasted time and energy and keeping ourselves free of less than notable influences is itself a discipline in consistency. Dancers must learn to be consistent in what they do, because if they should become lazy with their technique, they risk serious and painful injury. We, like the dancer, in our lives must be consistently focused on our goals, maintaining the integrity we have put in the course we have chosen for ourselves. This consistency will also require us to remove influences out of our lives which have been a persistent distraction to our goals. We might then need to step out of our comfort zone to deal with the problem of our influences. But influence can come from many sources, and some are easier to handle than others. For some, it is a matter of spending less time on the computer or phone. Others may want to consider turning the television on a little less often. But for those distracting influences coming from people in our lives, this can be a more challenging task, especially when such people are our family or close friends. The connections we make with people are some of the strongest bonds we ever form in life. It can be hard to distance ourselves from people we have shared time and energy with. This is mostly because of our experiences, which are our basis for understanding and identifying with the world and with ourselves. Experiences form memories to provide us with identity and understanding. They encompass all we know about the world, and what we know is comfortable. Also, the memories we have of individuals, particularly with emotional ties, provide a connection to how we see ourselves and how we define who we are. It is no wonder that whenever we face any sort of difficulty, we tend to default back to what is comfortable. So we often intensely maintain the connections we have with others. At times we keep them close to us possessively, in an attempt to keep a safety net of security and familiarity nearby. That is how strong the connections we make with others can be. Another difficulty is that we sometimes tend to associate with people who are at our level of influence or below, since we find such people comfortable and non-threatening. But this makes it difficult for our potential to grow, since this would keep the influence of our motivational ambitions consistently stagnant. If a dancer or a musician, or artist for that matter, were never to seek help to improve from those who know more or better, they could not advance their abilities very quickly or easily, maybe not ever. Likewise, if we do not seek out individuals with better characters, knowledge, or influence, we may never come to recognize what sort of great potential we each possess. Too much comfort leads to stagnancy and complacency. But if we leave behind influences that hold us back, we allow ourselves an exciting opportunity, filled with many good experiences, that turn us into so much more than we ever thought possible. It may not be necessary to eliminate friendships that have a deterring influence on our lives, but it may be necessary to limit the influence they have in our lives. At the same time, doing so also requires that we increase the influences of those with higher aspirations, to put ourselves in a better position to move forward. To do this means meeting new people and learning to associate and interact with them at their level. Of course, dancing may be one excellent way to meet new people with varying backgrounds. A good friend would never enable another to remain at their current state of dependency. Often it is the so-called or fair-weathered friend that distracts from work and ambitions, encouraging a lack of commitment in order to justify their own slothful lifestyle. Likewise, it is impossible to be a good friend by keeping in a current state of social, business, family, or physical atrophy. This only enables others to justify themselves in their own unhealthy lifestyle. What this suggests is that we have a duty to ourselves and to those in our sphere of influence to develop ourselves and to be the best we can be in all things we do. Consistency is the key to keeping on course with our lives. But it is just as easy to say you must have patience, because the road to success is not short. You also must put forth effort, because the course is difficult and never without opposition. And still, that would only be the beginning. Though we face challenges immediately before us, we would do well to, as much as possible, keep our gaze focused on the things we are currently involved with and slightly ahead. Challenges can present themselves at the most inopportune moments, but eventually our current problems fade, our present challenges diminish, and a new set will take their place. As challenges are met and replaced by more difficult ones, we can recognize it as a sign of growth. A person's growth depends on challenges, and often the only reason we do not meet challenges we are currently faced with sooner is only that we were not ready for them before the moment we received them. Beginning students of tap dance are given a short series of simple footwork patterns designed to increase strength, flexibility, and mobility. This also gets them comfortable to work in their shiny new metal shoes. If these students were given and asked to perform an advanced rhythm combination at the start, with competency, they would walk out rather than bother learning from such a place. But as easy steps are given and mastered, a new challenge is given, they work up to the advanced combinations, and stick with it even when the lessons seem hard. So we need to remember to be consistent and patient as we work through the challenges we face. Then, when we are presented with new challenges we are not sure how to face, we can say, I know this is hard, but I have done this before. Remember when I faced those other challenges? I worked through them, and I still stand now. This will be no different. A dance friend of mine once told me a bit about her story dealing with difficult experiences. She says, dance for me is a journey. There are times where I've been so discouraged and wanted to quit, but somehow I always make it through. I've had surgery 3 times, 2 on the left, and a stress fracture that put me out for 6 months. I learned to trust the Lord, and to tell you the truth, I'm grateful that it happened because I learned a lot. Dance is a way of life, a way of expressing and feeling joy. Advice I would give is to not be super hard on yourself. Do not compare yourself to other dancers because you can do something they cannot. Just learn from each other. End quote. Aubrey McGuire, Kaysville, Utah, student of ballet. A fast-paced life tends to infuse people with more thoughts and ideas than there is capacity to handle. The clashes of differing opinions run rampant across our senses, stirring our focus and ravaging our imaginations. It's true that a dancer may learn in one course how to navigate an area of space, and then spend years learning what to do in that space. Life differs in this sense, since we often must first sift through the mist of contrasts to define the space we are allotted and recognize the opportunities we have, before we can begin to do anything with it. Once we've done so, we cannot assume we can keep to the same space we have defined, or act as though we own it. Circumstances change, because the world continues to move around us. In this the dancer can relate. Dancers never perform in one steady place for long. They understand that they are merely guests to space. Dancers must move, change, explore, and create, being invites to space because of who they are. Dancers pass through space. They do not own it. But space desires most of all to be filled, and it will be filled, regardless of our ability or willingness to do so. If one does not do it, then another will. Opportunities in work and business, in social groups, and activities will open and close as the consistent shuffle of bodies move in and out to fill new space. In a way, this is reassuring, knowing that there are options always opening to us somewhere, often when we least expect it. This should make a difference in how we think about the world and our circumstances. But we must keep moving in our space to find those opportunities and learn to operate differently each time. As we do so, we will find a new contrast as each turn of the corner presents us with new choices, and as each decision presents new opportunities. Seeing things in this light invites a happier mood to our often routine lifestyles. So often, we are better inclined to think down on our circumstances and view decision as final acts rather than as a gate by which new events unfold from. Preceding this line of thinking is the notion of proper perspective. From the perspective of a dancer, practices can be long and tiring. Certain patterns are very demanding on the body, and at times a dancer may become overwhelmed by the demands placed upon them. This is true for all dancers, but I tend to sympathize most with the ballroom competitors, since their bad days affect not only their own training and the work of their coach, but their partners as well. Dancers will have days when they just don't feel like dancing. They, like most of us, have lives outside of dance, or other activities that take up a good portion of the day. They have jobs, families, other hobbies, friends, bills, baseball games, car repairs, appointments, traffic jams, and needed rest. They have all the regular responsibilities of life, and then try to fit dancing into the program as well. I had a lesson once with a couple preparing for their wedding a few months away. Luckily, they had given themselves a lot of time to prepare a dance routine, which meant they would be able to work on their dance without the added stress of an upcoming deadline. However, on one particular lesson, the couple came in obviously stressed. Apparently, they had been having a discussion, and something was said that led to them walking into the studio a little less relaxed and a little more stern than usual. I started them out on the usual practice, figuring that after a little warm-up, they would forget about their problems and be ready to work. I didn't consider how affected they were at the time. They had been working on bronze waltz patterns, and had struggled with learning the natural and reverse box step. In fact, most people do. As this was not an uncommon challenge for new students to face, I assured them that they were doing fine and that they just needed more practice. I could see my students then shudder a sigh and put on brave faces. This was a bad sign, but I didn't want to waste their lesson time. So I had them dance the two patterns up and down the dance floor a number of times to try to work them through the difficulty. As they went, they began to exhibit a gradual decline in ability, until at once they both stopped and started arguing with each other. This was not something I expected from this usually happy couple. But it also was not something I was going to let continue for long. I quickly stepped in and told them to take a break. "We aren't going to make any progress on this today," I said. "When you come back, we'll work on something else." After a trip to the water fountain and a brief quiet discussion on the side, they came back on the floor and were ready to dance. Whatever the initial problem was, they had worked it out. At first they were still a little stiff, but soon they loosened and the rest of the lesson was fun and energetic. Afterwards, they both apologized and explained that they were just having a bad day, and that the lesson had really helped. Of course, I was relieved that they had gotten something out of their lesson time. So I explained that everyone has days like that, and it was good they came to practice anyway. Then I explained, next time we will work extra hard on the waltz to make up for it. My students gave a quick nod, and with a wry grin said, "Okay," and they went out smiling. I never had another bad lesson with them after that, but that's how it goes. Often we have problems to deal with that are very frustrating, and we feel they must be near impossible to overcome. In these instances, a person must decide for themselves what they need to do to correct their circumstances. In other cases, much of our frustration can be avoided once we establish a firm mind about what is going on in our lives, what needs to be handled now, and what can wait. Organizing ourselves to expect certain challenges as necessary, but manageable, will help us to keep a proper perspective on difficulties we face. All things are handled best when they are kept in proper perspective. Dancers keep perspective by managing their time to accommodate a predetermined amount of progress. They set goals for each practice and work their plan to meet those goals. When performing, the dancer maintains perspective by keeping within a preset routine. In a sense, then, a dancer has two routines, one for managing their time in practice, and one for what they're performing. The routine is essential. It keeps everyone balanced and focused. It lets the individual know what they need to do and where they need to be. A dancer may wow their audience with beautiful movements, elegant patterns, and tricky combinations, but the audience doesn't see what is going on inside the dancer's mind. They only see the 2 or 3 minute piece of choreography that the dancer has worked for weeks or months on to prepare, but which appears effortless. The dancer thinks methodically within the practiced routine, moving from one pattern to the next and to the next. She does one step at a time, giving a special amount of focus to completing each segment in time with the music. She never rushes through a pattern because each moment of the routine is essential and must flow smoothly into the next sequence. Most of the time in our lives, we don't need to think too much about all that is going on around us, because we have routines, which are usually enough to keep us balanced and sure of ourselves. But sometimes we are inundated with more tasks and challenges than our routine can handle, and everything gets jumbled. Ballroom dancers will understand this concept as they recall any lesson where an entire hour was spent reviewing the same series of 2 steps over and over, stopping every moment because their head wasn't turned right, their toe wasn't pointed, they weren't leading through their partner, more turn was needed, now too much, stepping to the side, moving straight forward, don't tilt the frame, peel the toe, stretch the side, shoulders back, head up, and now let's fix your partner. On these days, a moment to stop and think about all that is going on is appropriate and helpful. Take time to inventory current circumstances and review what needs to be done and what does not. There are some things we don't need to worry about, or that we worry about more than we need to. Once this has been worked out in our minds, we can move forward from there, managing one thing at a time. With this, I like to keep in mind a very useful quote by an unknown person. Quote, "Life may not be the party we hoped for, but while we are here, we might as well dance." We work to develop and strengthen ourselves for many reasons. As we do, challenges become our strengths. We work out the details of our lives from a very young age, discovering who we are by the exercise of our abilities, exploring the possibilities of our world and the prospects of our potential. For a dancer, the greatest challenge may be only in perfecting abilities to perform what is required of them. To this, all act in similar manner. As we sift through the crowded places of our lives to find a space we may call our own, we distinguish ourselves from others. We also gain purpose in that space. But our time there may be limited. Even so, as we make the best of it, we should remember to give thanks to those who have helped us along the way. Looking back, we should have appreciation as we remember where we've been and the challenges we've overcome to get to where we are. This will help us to keep a proper perspective on life.